I'd like to welcome to the stage two very distinguished people and two great friends of mine. The first is Gregg Toppo. Gregg is a terrific writer, and he's the national education correspondent for the USA Today. He is also a former teacher, and Gregg has written a book called The Game Believes in You, How Digital Play Can Make Kids Smarter. I read it. I was lucky enough to read an advanced copy, and this is tremendous. He's going to talk more about the possibility and the potential of games. And Louise Dubé is iCivics Executive Director. Since joining iCivics last summer, she's led a number of organizations in making and delivering and enhancing educational technology. She's somebody who gets educational technology from her time at WGBH in Boston, one of the best and greatest PBS stations in America, and certainly a station that understood early on how to tap into a technology that was transformative and make that technology educational and use it for good. To her work at Pangea Tools and Time to Know. Louise and Gregg, thank you very much. Thank all of you on behalf of the Entertainment Software Association and our foundation. We're so honored to be here and honored to see what's next. Thank you.
Lean into the mic.
I know.
Who's going to pick it up? Okay. Is this on? Yes, working?
Yeah.
This is actually a controlled experiment. We are keeping the food away and turning up the heat.
We're going to
really
pull
just
out the
want to see
yoga
what
mat.
happens. Another 3-4 hours of this. What people really do. Thanks so much, Eric. As you said, I'm Gregg Toppo from USA Today. Really happy to be here and really kind of thrilled to be talking to you folks from all over the country. Here with Louise, you know, one of the things that I think we should do before Louise and I start talking to one another is just find out a little bit about what you guys have been doing this week in DC. And you know, I'm just thinking it would be fun to just call a few volunteers, people who want to talk about, you know, kind of a highlight of what you guys have been doing here, what's something that stood out for you, most exciting thing that's happened while you were sort of involved in this, maybe something that surprised you. I don't know. I'll leave it open to you. Anybody want to volunteer? If nobody volunteers, I'll pick someone. How's that? I'm a former teacher. Yeah, go ahead. In the white shirt. And here's what. You do the first thing you write. Stand up, say who you are and where you're from.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gabriel Morris from Los Angeles, California. One of the most exciting things about my week was after playing iCivics, I actually talked to my mom, who is an educator. She's actually a government economics and US history teacher. And so the most exciting part.
Yay for mom!
Love your mom!
Yeah!
The most exciting part of my week was getting to tell her about the game, and we were on the phone, and she was like playing it, and then I was playing it, and then it was just really cool to just play a game that's like actually you're learning things. So that was my favorite.
Very cool.
Give that kid a royalty.
Yeah, he's going to get a check in the mail soon. Yeah.
The thing about iCivics do I have it right, that I remember the first time I really kind of sat down and played for a while, I didn't know enough about the Constitution to really, you know, kind of be very good at it. But I was laughing out loud at how, you know, kind of, you know, running back and forth and things just get really out of hand very fast.
Yeah.
How many of you had no experience with it before now? Had you all played it before? Or how many? Raise your hand high if you had no experience with it. Or okay. Oh, good. So a lot of you really good. Very nice. Good. So it had a nice. Anybody else want to tell us about kind of what their experience has been? Something that surprised them pleasantly or unpleasantly? Something that kind of was, yeah. Go ahead. Let's stand up, please.
My name is Amber Morris. And
Could you speak a little more loud?
My name is Amber Morris.
Very nice.
And I'm from Houston, Texas. And one of the most overwhelming things that's not just too overwhelming was the homework load and everything that we have to do and complete on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It still requires sleep. But the most exciting thing was like the bonding that I have with all of my friends
Nice.
and the new people that I'm getting an opportunity to meet.
Very cool. Sweet. We'll do one or two more folks, and then we'll And then Louise and I'll start talking a little loud and clear.
I'm Diane Gutierrez. I come from Sylmar, California. And one of the most exciting things here is that I am at a program where people more or less think alike to the way that I do, in the way that they express themselves and are actually interested in what they're learning here. So that's very exciting to me, because not a lot of people at my school or in my area like this field.
Okay, cool, thanks. Was that an actual hand raise, or you were just
Yeah,
saying
the
the
hand raise. So my name is Cristian Gonzalez, and I think, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I think one of the main things that I've really enjoyed since coming here is the relationships I've built with a lot of the people here. And just, we've been going through these classes and these government trips and stuff, but I gotta say, I mean, meeting new people is always a pleasure, and I don't know, I love meeting people, so that's one thing.
Cool, thanks. Let's do one more. You had way in the back.
My name is Gregg Toppo.
Little louder.
I'm from. My name is Gregg Toppo. I'm
Thank
from
you.
Sacramento, California, and my best experience so far was this morning when we were on the house floor. I thought that was the coolest thing ever, because like you see that like on TV. And
Isn't that great? Yeah.
that was really cool.
Yeah. I cover education here in DC, and it's always, I mean, after 15 years, it's still like a thrill to like walk out into the gallery there and just check out, because it's like, hey, it's the West Wing. This is so cool.
Where's
Really
Rob?
fun. Really fun.
Can I just say that
Yeah.
one of my greatest experience my whole life, I love the legislative branch, but my cool experience, I am a lawyer, was to go to the Supreme Court. And I hope that you guys get to do that, and I hope many of you consider becoming lawyers. It is the gateway to everything. You can do anything once you're a lawyer. I have to say, Justice O'Connor, who founded iCivics, as you know, right, made the tickets available to us. I took my whole family and my kids. One of them was 12 years old. He was the one who had introduced me to iCivics to start with. He got really jazzed about, do I have a right? And particularly, win the White House, which is the game you have to play next year. We're coming out with a new version. It's gonna be totally awesome, and it's gonna prepare you with all of the platforms for this election. And so you can find out everything, what Hillary Clinton thinks about education in her platform, as well as Scott Walker and whoever else. But I went to the Supreme Court. It was the most boring case on earth. It was a legislative, administrative law case, really boring. And I talked to my kids for 3 hours about that case. And for those of you who love to argue, debate, going to the Supreme Court is the best thing you could do for yourself. So there's my plug for being a lawyer. And running for a law firm is nothing like, do I have a right out to tell you? It doesn't work that way. Clients do not come into the door that fast. But anyway, okay.
It's funny, I was going to make a plug for being a journalist, because you get to see these things as well. You get to go to the
Yes.
Supreme Court.
Yeah, but you have to have a certain
Yeah,
character.
House floor. So, anyway. Actually, can you say a little bit more about the Justice O'Connor connection to this game? Because I don't know how many of you know that she is essentially the inspiration for it, for all the games.
Yeah.
Give us kind of the short version of that story, because I think maybe some people want to know it.
Short, I don't know, but
I'll cut you off.
Yeah. Justice O'Connor is not only the inspiration. This is her idea, and this is her legacy. She has stated unbelievably that she cares more about civic education and you guys getting an education in what our government is about than she does about her legacy on the Supreme Court. That's a lot to say from a woman who really has broken every barrier. She retired to take care of her husband, who was sick, but during her retirement process, she realized how very dangerous judicial elections are in our country. I don't know if you're aware of this issue, but the idea that we would spend money to elect judges is really just not in keeping with our Constitution and the separation of the branches of power, right? I mean, there's a fundamental mismatch there. So she wanted something to ensure that all of it, everyone, all the kids, everyone understood that we had 3 branches of government as a starting point, and that we know how our system works.
And what was the thing about electing judges that offended her sensibility?
We have an independent judicial branch.
Mhm.
We have an independent judicial branch. You are not responsible to what voters, your decision should not be influenced by money or what voters think. It's pretty simple. And based on that, she decided that really there was a lack in our educational system that kids just didn't understand.
And how did she come around to the idea that a video game could get that across?
That's the amazing part, right? Just O'Connor, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but she probably has never opened the computer, honestly. And so she had this fantastic clerk. The clerks in the Supreme Court, very important. And this fantastic clerk, Professor Julie O'Sullivan at Georgetown, where you were yesterday, Professor Sullivan had a kid. And her kid was a video gamer. And she saw the power, as is in Gregg's book, the power of gaming for putting kids in the action, for really being like completely in the game. And that experience, when they showed her, Julie's son, playing the games, those are the 2 things that came together. She knew there was a problem, she knew this was a way to engage kids. And then we just put it together, and that's how iCivics. We have a picture of that day, and I think you put that in the USA Today article.
I wrote about it.
Yeah, it was a fantastic piece. We have that picture where that first day where we showed Justice O'Connor video games.
I think he was playing Do I Have a Right, wasn't he?
No, it didn't exist at the time.
What's that?
I don't think it
It
existed.
didn't exist, okay.
Yeah.
But she definitely had a,
Yeah.
she definitely had a good look at it when it was developed, from what I remember talking to Julie.
I think her eyes just, like,
Yeah.
she really just got it. It was one of those aha moments, you know.
I want to do one last biographical question, and then we'll get to some of the issues. You mentioned very briefly about your involvement in iCivics. Can you talk a little bit more about that? You talked about your son. He introduced you to it. He was playing it. Was he playing it just on his own? Was he in school? What was the situation?
Yeah, so he came home. This is Daniel. Daniel.
How old is Daniel now?
He's 12 now. He came home in 2012, and Daniel was in 4th grade in Weston. We have in Massachusetts, and we have, I don't know how many people from Massachusetts here. Well, I know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, not too many. Great state of Massachusetts. It was the election year, and the teacher had been looking for election games or resources. She found iCivics completely independently, Mrs. Brown, and assigned Win the White House, and so that the kids would understand about the election cycle and how to run your own campaign. Essentially, in Win the White House, you have 2 periods. You're in the primary, and you have to run your own campaign. You have to decide where to put an appearance. You have to decide where to raise money. You have to decide what your platform is going to be. You have to argue against your opponent, and so on. So you're really doing the whole thing yourself. And Daniel comes home and he says, I'd like to play this video game. And I say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, you have to do homework. We don't play video games in the afternoon. And he goes, no, Mom, you don't understand. This is my homework. I'm like, what? That can't be, and it was. So he goes off, he plays Win the White House, he comes back to me and he says, Mommy, I wish all our school were like iCivics. At that point, I decided that we had entered a different realm, and that iCivics really was worth paying attention to. Subsequently, when they called me to take over this job, I did. But that is not the end of the story. Daniel then came back and asked me to name all of our elected representatives for our county. And I fortunately had the answers, though I was a little bit worried there for a second, and has remained interested in politics ever since. So I think for iCivics, we don't only want people to learn the rules, we also want them to draw connections to your home states. You guys went to visit your representatives today. Those are the connections you need to make.
Wait, I have one more question about this. You skipped a little part here. You said, so you realized how great this game was, and then they asked you to head it. I was like, there's something that happened in the middle there. Like, I mean, most people would just say, oh, let me send a check because I want to donate to this cause. You ended up running the thing. So how did that happen? Did you get in touch with them?
No,
Did
they
you
came to
find-
me.
But how did they even know who you were?
You know, it's a small world, education technology, I have to say. And the former executive director, Jeff Curley, fantastic guy, going back to Harvard, educational for a doctorate, and was looking for somebody. And I was at PBS, GBH, and decided it was a nice match. Well, our office is here, iCivics' office is here, and I live in Boston and on a plane with you every week.
You know, one of the things, and I'm actually thinking, I can ask you this question, but I'm actually hoping maybe I can even open it up to the folks in the audience who might have a thought about this. And that is, you know, one of the things that I've always really been intrigued by is this question of, you know, when people hear the word games, as you heard and as Justice heard, you know, they get this idea in their head that it's something that's not serious. And I guess one of the questions that I have for a lot of people is, like, how do we overcome that idea that a game can be serious, that a game can, you know, be sort of nutritious, and that even games that aren't education related, like for instance, how many actual like hardcore gamers are there in this audience? There's one. Come on. Okay, here we go.
Just a few.
Okay, good. Thank you. You know, I mean, one of the things that's been really fascinating for me to think about is this idea. You're going to agree with me, I hope, that, you know, playing a game of any sort, if you're playing a hard enough game, you know, what's fun is that it's hard, right? Not that it's easy, right? That it's a challenge. And in a lot of the other areas of our lives, and I'm sure, you know, you like smart young people, like you're really not challenged that much, right? So when you come up against something like this, you know, it's really exciting for that reason, because someone has decided they're going to challenge you. And I guess I just answered my own question, didn't I? But I mean, I guess maybe the question is sort of what has to happen for people to understand that games can be serious.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I think the word game, first of all, is a real issue for us, right? I think in education, we get sort of labeled as one thing. There are many different kinds of games. There are games where you learn a certain set of skills, and there are games like iCivics where you actually learn content. So if we could call it something else, that would be serious play is what the latest word is, and maybe that's what we're doing. I think it comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what education is about. Education is about failure. You gotta fail first, and then from the failure, you gotta understand. You guys are going to fail in your careers. I don't say that, I say that with the utmost respect, right? We all fail, and that's the only way that we can discover what's next for us. And so I think that if people understand that education is not something that you get spoon-fed, but something you discover, that's where they're going to be more open to the kind of things. But, you know, what do other people?
Anybody else have a thought about this?
Yes, over there.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tristan. I'm from Irvine, California.
Okay.
I have a question about educational gaming in a more general sense. How do you balance out, you know, the competitiveness? When does the competitiveness of the game kind of take over from the educational aspect of the game, and how do you really account for that competitiveness taking over the education part?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's fascinating, actually. I think we wrestle with that a lot, right? I think if you're interested in that question, you should come and work for us. We wrestle with that because really they're the same thing, right? The competitiveness, particularly against other folks, whether it's offline or online, is part of what keeps you engaged. Engagement is part of your learning. So we can't take one away without diminishing the experience of the other. The other side of it is, if it's all about competitiveness and there's nothing sticking, then you're lost. So it's a balance that you have to strike somehow.
I mean, in general, I think schools are sort of allergic to competitiveness, except with sports, right? With sports, it's great. Or even band, actually. You know, band. I was in a high school band. I had band competitions, right? You know.
What was your instrument?
I played the trumpet.
You played?
But right. I mean, we're willing to not only put up with, but sort of embrace competition in just about everywhere else except academics, which is, I think, is kind of weird. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, Diane Gutierrez,
Speak up.
California, and my question was that games usually go in a wide range, but usually they have either one way to be correctly played or an infinite amount of, or certain amount of endings, different endings. And with your game, it seems like it's very determined on what their decisions and have different outcomes. So who necessarily decides what is the correct decision to make, like for the game? Because not everyone agrees with one point of view, obviously. So what?
Do you have an example in mind, or?
Not necessarily.
So when you say the way the game goes, you mean like the way it ends, or?
Mostly the way that the outcomes really develop, like who exactly decides that, okay, if you make this certain decision, that's a good thing.
Okay.
Or if you make a different one, that's a bad thing.
Okay.
I love this question. We wrestle with that also a lot because not everything is as clean cut and black and white as we make it in the game, right? That's basically what you're saying, and that's absolutely true. What we hope will happen we're actually trying to do that right now. We take our games and we put them within larger questions, and we hope that people like you are going to have a conversation in the classroom after you're playing the game and talk about those issues where you didn't agree. Right? And have a conversation with your colleagues about what you think, and I think that's the best thing we can do. It's hard to embody that exactly in the game. Who decides? Carrie Ray Hill, who is not here today, but she's our director of programming. We have a few folks who are on our programming team. They are usually both lawyers and middle school or high school social studies or civics.
Gotcha. Other observations, questions, comments?
Last question, folks. Last question. Make it a good one.
Oh, is this it?
Oh, well, maybe two for quick.
Maybe what? Two for
Maybe
quick?
two for quick. You're gonna, as you will. So,
There's
yeah.
food at the end of this question, so.
I'm Leah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm Leah Woodbridge. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My question is that obviously access to technology is really important for these programs, and I can see many ways how your programs will help kids to live below the poverty line. So how is it one of your goals to be able to get this technology out to those kids who may not initially have access to it?
I love this
So the
question.
digital divide.
Yes. First of all,
That'd be brief, by the way.
So first of all, we think technology, particularly gaming and technology, is incredibly powerful to address the digital divide, partly because public schools are the only place where we can reach every single kid. People forget about public schools. Very, very important. Please don't stop supporting public schools. And the digital divide, so much is happening to ensure broadband access to all the schools now. It's unbelievable the amount that has been put into E-rate. I don't know if you want to know about all the ins and outs of that, but it's really happening and it's really fast. We at iCivics service 85% of zip codes nationally, including an overrepresentation in low income districts, and we're very proud of that. And that is our mission right there.
I think I can just add one very quick thing. One of the things that's always impressed me about iCivics is that it's, if you will, it's very low-fi. That is, you don't need the latest, greatest, most amazing computer to access it.
Right. That is partly because we have no money, so we couldn't do these fancy graphics at the great but yes, it has had this incredible effect that you can use it very easily without fiber. So that's great.
Folks, thanks so much for listening, and I think we have one more. You're about to walk on stage.
We're going to thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank us. Go for it.
Yeah.
Buy that book.
Yes.
Game believes in you.
All right, yeah, just on behalf of JSA, I want to thank you for coming here and taking time out of your busy schedule. It's been really inspiring to hear you guys talk about all the educational opportunities that technology offers. And I can't wait to see how the work that you guys both do affect these schools. So here's a mug on behalf of JSA.
Cool.
Ms. Dubé, thank you for all you do to help integrate technology and fun into the learning process for civics. On behalf of JSA, I'd like to present you with this one.
Oh, thank you so much.
Folks, on the podium, everyone smile, this is in the picture.